we all were going through these things together, and we were all terrified, and we didn't fully understand it. And instead of kind of like reaching out to each other in those moments and going like, hey, I'm scared, are you scared too? Yeah, okay, cool. We kind of like became antagonistic towards each other, and like self-righteous and certain of our position.
How did we get here? And even worse, is it worth it? At the cost of being at war with your neighbors? That's why I'm running for mayor. Mayor of Eddington.
I'm super interested in like your and Ari's relationship. Can you talk a little bit about how it's evolved from Beau is Afraid into making Eddington?
Yeah. So this. Well, first the first time that I spoke to Ari, I remember I was in my backyard and we spoke on the phone, and this was obviously before we made Beau is Afraid, and I don't know how to explain it. It's like one of those things that you have, there are relationships where you instantly know, like, this is somebody that I'm gonna know for a long time, and I just feel like I just appreciate him, and I instantly, like, the way that he talks about the world, his observations, his humor, I get it. Like, he doesn't have to explain it to me. Like, I just get it from being next to him, like in the room talking to him. So that I knew immediately. And then we worked on Beau, and it was a difficult shoot. It was a difficult character. It was very emotional. But I just felt like even closer to him. There's something really exciting. And so when he wanted me to be in another film, of course, I was like flattered. And, like, you never know, because part of it goes, maybe he wasn't happy with what I did in Beau. And so I was really happy. But then this, like, my first thought happens is like, okay, what if now that we're like kind of friends, he's going to go easy on me? Are we like, do we now trust each other and like each other in a way that's not going to be beneficial for the film? And it's a weird dynamic. Like, once you get to know somebody more, it can go like one of two ways. And luckily that's not the case. There was like as much paranoia and distrust as ever. No, just really funny. But there was definitely like, yeah, it felt like there was a continuation of where we left off, but we were willing to kind of push each other even more, and that felt like really important.
Well, it's interesting because I'm curious to hear a little bit about his directing style, because he seems so like unassuming, and he's very obviously self-deprecating a lot of times. Like, is he kind of different on set?
I think it depends on the scene. Like, he doesn't have just one way of working, and it's probably different with whichever actor he's working with. So there's something that is very, I think in some ways, maybe the most self-assured I've seen him is on set. He definitely like has a very strong feeling, but the thing that I like most about working with him is like, he will go the night before. He's always like coming up with this shot list, and so he's going through the scene, and he's like figuring out where he wants to put the camera, and then we will get there, and while he knows precisely what he wants, he's also open to and excited by like inspiration that might just develop in the moment. And those are kind of like, that's my favorite moment, is seeing him kind of make that adjustment. And there are times where like he literally, his eyes, like you see him like get like fired up, and he gets excited and inspired by something that somebody said. And those are like the moments where I'm like, okay, well, he's gonna do like something really good. I think will happen.
Yeah. Does anything come to mind, like a specific scene where that you remember that happening?
I just well, this one the only thing that comes to mind won't be that meaningful to you, but it's just it was this scene early on. It was actually our second day of shooting, and it was in the sheriff's office, and it's when I've just announced in the previous scene that I'm running for mayor, and I come in and I think we both were like figuring it out, and there was just a moment where I was like looking for something that I just couldn't find in the script, and we were standing next to each other, and we both are saying like the lines like out loud and in our heads, and kind of like I'm acting it out, and he's sitting next to me, and I remember just like it overtook his body, and he made this gesture where he kind of went like that, and something clicked in me. I don't know how to articulate it, but it became like this foundational piece for me, just that gesture. Wow. And it's small, and it seems like insignificant. It wouldn't mean anything to anyone, but like to me in that moment. And I think the thing that I like about him as a director is he's like he doesn't stand like at a distance from the character's experience. Mm-hmm. He like fully like lives it and takes it on. And so if it's like an intense scene, he's like sweating and jittery, and like you can see like it's like in him. Yeah. And I know that sounds strange. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah. I see him like take on the experience of the characters, and that's I love that.
Watching this movie, I feel like we as a society have not sort of grappled with the collective trauma that we went through together in the pandemic. How did you kind of, like, just sitting with the script, making this movie, like, did it inform how you kind of processed that time?
I think it's, in some ways, yes. Like, it allowed, it gave me, like, permission to recognize the absurdity in myself and my friends and family and in strangers. It allowed me to kind of laugh at that in some ways and be, on one hand, entertained by that. But also, I think it allowed me to feel connected to people that I might not have felt a connection to prior to that. And it allowed me to feel like, to empathize with and to understand, and to like forgive everybody and forgive myself, and to just kind of recognize like, you know, we all were going through these things together, and we were all terrified, and we didn't fully understand it. And instead of kind of like reaching out to each other in those moments and going like, hey, I'm scared, are you scared too? Yeah, okay, cool. We kind of like became antagonistic towards each other. And like self-righteous and certain of our position, that our position was the righteous one and the right one. And that, in some ways, it's so obvious, like, well, that's not going to be helpful. And so, in some ways, kind of allowing myself to go through that experience with like, it's somewhat the distance of a film, and using like humor and entertainment to kind of look at those moments, I think maybe is allowing me to reflect on that period differently, and also to imagine, or in some ways to prepare for what future events might happen, right? Mm-hmm. And like, yes, who the knows? I don't know how I'm going to deal with any moment, but in some ways it was like, yeah, that definitely wasn't the way. And whatever kind of like fracturing we were like experiencing, it was like manipulated and exacerbated by this very powerful tech world, and that's clearly a danger, and clearly like the antithesis of what we need. Like, that's anti-human, and it is so much of what like caused so much real pain. And so I to me, that's something when I just read the script, I thought that's what was valuable about it. I hope that you have that experience watching the film.
I am recording this. Fair warning. Is that really necessary?
Look, Joe, 6 feet.
I get the sense that, like, of all the parts of filmmaking, that talking about your movie is your favorite.
Yes, I'm
Right.
glad you saw that. That's I really just make the movie so I can do this.
You were living in New Mexico when you were writing it.
I grew up in New Mexico, and I spent my adolescence there. My parents lived there. My family lives there, and so I was living in New Mexico when I decided to start writing this during COVID.
And so when you decided to start writing it, and like when you are just kind of in the infancy of this, are you thinking like, I want to make a satire, or I want to kind of like just write what I'm like? Was it supposed? It didn't feel in a lot of parts of it like necessarily exaggerated.
Yeah, no, I think it was more that I wanted to pull back as far as I could and give and just make a movie that felt the way the world was feeling to me, and make a film about the environment, and not be so lost in any one person's point of view, because it is a film about people who are all living in different realities. And people who distrust each other completely because they're living in these like small bubbles of certainty. And I wanted to make a film that functioned as a genre film. It's a Western. It kind of becomes an action movie at the end, but make a film that that is about what happens when these people who are siloed off and they're completely alienated from each other. What happens when they start bumping up against each other, and what is the logic that grows out of that and starts to possess them all?
Yeah. I'm curious, it's interesting because we're sort of grappling with the like different factions and bubbles within this small town in this film. And then you're also trying to like make it for Hollywood, which is like its own kind of bubble, if that makes sense. Was that challenging for you? Like translating it, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm making anything for Hollywood, but if anything, I'm trying to
just piss everyone off in Hollywood.
Well, no, I'm not trying to. Well, I'm just trying to do my thing, But no, the question was, I'm making a film about the incoherent miasma that we're like living in, and so how do you do that without sacrificing coherence and while still telling a story? And so part of that is putting in as many people as you can, as many characters that represent different, in some ways archetypes, but also different corners of the internet. The film is kind of about the internet, and how we're all living in the internet and what that's done to us. And at the same time, it's a Western, and it's about people who are kind of media literate, and like Joe Cross, the character played by Joaquin Phoenix, would have seen a lot of those Westerns, and I think he's even the way he carries himself is informed by all of that. And he's somebody who would have loved the action movies of the 80s and the 90s. He's 50 years old, and at the end he gets to live in an action movie. And so it's yeah.
I'm curious, when you make a movie like this, are you thinking about like who will be receptive to a film like this and who's not, or do you try to not think about the audience?
I try to not think, especially when I'm writing. I try not to think about what I can do or can't do or what I shouldn't do, because that'll just paralyze you. So I try to just write and just follow my intuition and get it all on paper, and then it becomes a matter of steeling yourself and not losing your nerve and maybe recognizing when something's not right. But no, I wouldn't say that I go into it like looking for an effect, but then at the same time I try not to chicken out of doing things that feel necessary, even though they might be, I don't know, they might divide people.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I think about like a lot of your other films you have dealt with, even when it's like funny or scary, it's like there are deeper themes in there, right? Like family trauma or like anxiety or something, right? But I think about like those are like more personal, whereas this was kind of like more of a macro take, and look at like just like societal ills, right?
Yeah, that's definitely, there is something more macro in that sense going on here. But I try to take something of a sociological stance to some degree. But the film also kind of gets gripped by paranoia, and
Sure.
and like the film kind of warps and goes off the rails in different ways, and becomes a genre film. So I don't want to make it sound like spinach, like it's not.
Sure.
It's supposed to be fun, but it's also in a lot. But I wrote the film in a state of anxiety and worry about what's happening to us and where we are and what does it mean to be completely siloed off from each other and to not have a shared reality and to not be reachable to each other.
Yeah.
And it's very scary, and it feels like we're living out this experiment that has clearly failed. It's not working, but not only do the people at the levers not seem to be interested in slowing it down, it's accelerating,
Yeah.
and so it's and it feels like we're on the cusp of something new, and it feels to me sinister, like what's happening with AI, what's happening with just these new governments. That it's not just here in America; it's all over the world, and so it's
Yeah.
It's all of that's there. So I guess it's a way of saying, in a way, it's just as personal as any of those earlier films. It's all, it's all coming from
you.
yeah. I mean, to a point. But I grew up in New Mexico, and I did a lot of research. I drove all over the state, and I talked to different people, sheriffs, mayors. I went to pueblos, and so many of the characters in this film are informed by those people, and like Joaquin's character is modeled on one of the sheriffs that I met.
Wow.
Even his wardrobe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that the first time you had done something like that for a film? That level of interviews and things like that and research?
This level of research, yeah.
Okay.
This was the first time that it felt necessary, but it also really fed the movie and was probably the most fun part of the process. And you always want the film to somehow get away from you. You don't, and that's something that was able to happen here.
It sounds like you're feeling a little bit of like despair, like societally. Like, do you feel like? I mean, I guess because I guess making this feels like you're engaging with sort of our reality in some way, and that like even doing that is kind of like an act of maybe hope for some sort of sanity to be restored at some point.
Well, I have a lot of hope. I don't have a lot of confidence, but I do think there can maybe be some strange solidarity in like sitting back and like collectively like taking in like the absurdity of our situation, and I don't know. The movie is about people who cannot connect, who aren't hearing each other, who can't reach each other. And maybe inherent in that is some sort of, I don't know, call to re-engage with each other, because it's the only way that this is going to happen. Right now we're completely alienated from each other.
I wonder,
and that's dehumanizing.
Yeah, I wonder if you feel like particularly attuned to that, given like sort of growing up in New Mexico, but then also living in the coasts and like.
Certainly,
Yeah.
and so many people that are close to me are living in totally different algorithms, and it in so many ways it feels like not even worth it to try to have these conversations. But it's.
What else can we do?
I don't see how else it's ever gonna change.
Yeah.
We're we're all kind of on the wrong end of like these like puppet strings, and you know, but our neighbors are not our enemy.
Yeah, and just to wrap, I was curious how you've been kind of feeling about the Nathan Fielder sort of explosion, you know, but for a long time he was sort of this, felt like a little bit of a deep cut, you know, and then, now it's just, everyone's obsessed with him.
I mean, I'm like Nathan Fielder's biggest fan. Nathan for You was the greatest, but I think you know, and I loved The Curse, but The Rehearsal is like the best thing I've ever seen on TV. That's just incredible. And season 1 I thought was like just unimpeachably great and like labyrinthine, and I don't know how he did it, but then for me season 2 is maybe even more amazing, and it just, he's a genius.